There was something about gays and Judy Garland. Betty Davis once said, "You'll know you've made it when drag queens start imitating you." I think because of the Wizard of Oz, the gays always loved Judy. As a matter of fact, I have a Judy live at the Palace poster in the corner. I have a lot of theater posters. Anyway, I can't focus the camera on it now. But I have a Judy live at the Palace poster. Actually, I have two. She was an icon. All over the United States, gay men loved Hollywood. I was born in 1952 in a small town called Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. I graduated high school and went off to the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, and my first day in New York was the day of the Stonewall riots. I was 17 years old. That was my introduction to not only New York City, but to what it was like to be a gay person in the United States of America in 1969. 69 was all about the hippie movement and free love, unless you were gay. I got to see how dreary and dirty the Stonewall was. It was two storefronts. The wall in between had been knocked down, and when you first went in, there was a small little cubicle about the size of a card table. And then there was another door with a window, and you put your ID through, and then if they recognized you, they let you in. You got through that second door. Now, the first room, the bar was on the right-hand side, and it was pretty much something that somebody had built. There were two pans of water underneath. One was for soaping up the glasses, the other for rinsing. That water never got changed. From the time they opened at 4 in the afternoon until they closed at 4 in the morning, it got recycled and recycled and recycled. The bathrooms had no running water, so by 10 o'clock at night, you could smell it all the way out into the bar. The place reeked. It was so dirty, I didn't feel comfortable there. There was a partition where they knocked the top part of the wall out but kept the bottom part, and you could walk into the other room, and that's where people danced. Somebody had an old jukebox they brought in. There was nothing current on it. It was not being maintained by anybody. It was all old 45s that somebody had. Lots of early 50s, lots of old Patsy Cline, lots of country and western, a couple of Doris Day, Lena Horne, Stormy Weather, Peggy Lee, Fever, maybe a Dinah Shore, and a lot of Judy Garland. It was a nickel a play, or 6 played for a quarter. Back in the far corner was the wishing well. A black plastic sheet stapled to the floor, a table with a gallon glass jug on it that said wishing well, and you flipped your quarter in and made a wish. They made a little railing that rounded it all off. It could have been made to look pretty. It wasn't. It was pathetic looking. There was no artistic design to it. The money was supposed to go to charity, but charity was whoever was working that night. It went in their pocket. When I first saw the Stonewall Inn, I said to myself, this is a place I never want to come back to. I said, I can't believe this place is even open. Why would anyone want to come here? Looking back, in hindsight, it had a small little crowd that it catered to, and it served a necessary purpose at the time because it gave these people a home, a place to go where they wouldn't be harassed unless the police raided. The types that were in the Stonewall were old men and drag queens. Now, these weren't flamboyant drag queens. These were men that when their mothers died, got their mother's old clothing, and that's what they were wearing. They looked like little old church ladies until you got close and saw the 5 o'clock shadow. The drag queens were all older. I don't think I ever saw one young drag queen, and they didn't go for looking young or pretty or attractive. They put on foundation, some eyeliner, a little lipstick, a wig, combed it out, put on their mother's three-piece suits, and that's what they were wearing. Cigarettes and cigarette holders and gloves all the way to the elbow so you couldn't see the hair on their arms. Or you got the really flamboyant queens in Hawaiian shirts in January. All middle-aged to older, real older, the ones that have been around since World War I. Now, of course, there were a few hustler types in there to pick up that type. Now, the hustlers were mostly my age, and they all needed a good bath. These were the ones who, well, you know the scale of hustlers. There's the really hot, good-looking ones, and then it goes down the line to the ones that turn a trick for a roast beef sandwich, and that's a good night for them. There were a lot of street kids hanging around. They were just in there trying to survive. And these were the ones the police picked upon because they were easy targets. Drag queens and old gay men weren't going to fight back. If the cops were bored that night, they could go right to Stonewall, maybe punch a few people, take the cash out the register, and that was just something fun to do. That was their attitude. Down the street was another gay bar called Ties, where all the colleges went, all in Lacoste polo shirts, a sea of alligators. And they would stand like this to make their muscles look bigger, and there was music but no dancing. Two men couldn't dance together. It was against the law, and they didn't look the typical stereotype, so they were pretty much left alone. Further down was a gay country and western bar, Boots and Saddles. Some gay women went there, but the cops were too dumb to realize women could be lesbians. So it was just a country and western bar. There was no reason to raid it. Down the other end of Christopher Street was the leather bar, the Ramrod. And they were left alone because the cops didn't know how to handle queens in leather on motorcycles. Now, I wasn't comfortable in the Ramrod. You have to realize I was just a country boy, a country hick in the city. And in many ways, I still am. On the other side of Sheridan Square were the two other establishments. Julius is run by the New York Police Department, and the Stonewall, run by the Mafia. Julius has had a little back area where they made fresh cheeseburgers, and you could sit at these tables and hold hands. But Julius has had guys walk around, and when you heard, it was knock off what you're doing. But there were stained glass windows the whole way round. Anyone could look in. It was not a place to show any overt signs of affection. You couldn't hold hands. You couldn't put arms around each other. It was against the law. The Stonewall clientele were not welcome at Ties, Boots and Saddles, or the Ramrod, and they most certainly wouldn't have ever been served if they ever walked in. The Stonewall was totally dark. There were a couple of light bulbs screwed into sockets, very dim light, mostly red or blue. The dance floor was in red, and then there was a white light bulb. And whoever was working the door, if they thought the cops were coming or someone to be concerned about, they would hit that light switch. And when you saw that stark white light, if you were dancing, you stopped. If you were holding hands or touching, you stepped away because you were about to get raided. Everybody would find their own little spot and stay in it. It was a very scary time. These raids would happen about twice a month. The cops would come in and ask to see ID and make everybody leave. They would take everybody's numbers and threaten them with having their names in the paper. They would scare and emotionally terrorize a lot of people. If you even looked at the police hard, they would hit you with a club. A lot of people were beaten senseless, but that was never reported in the press. For the cops back then, abusing and harassing gays was a sport. From what I saw, the Stonewall was never overly packed. So if you got 5 burly policemen going in with guns and clubs on their side, and there's maybe 12 people at the bar, men over 60 in their mother's clothing, and 1 or 2 flamboyant queens and hustlers, they're not going to fight back. They're just going to cower. But on the night of the riot, Judy Garland had died the week before, and everyone was talking about Judy. They couldn't believe it. The Stonewall was showing her classic movie, A Star is Born, on a bedsheet, hung from one corner to another, and word had gotten out and the place was packed. Queens from ties and boots and saddles were there, and also from the ramrod. Oh, the leather queens love Judy. You know a leather queen squeals the loudest. And from around the corner, a lot of business from Julius's came round. Well, Julius is run by the New York Police Department, remember? Did not like losing all that business on a Saturday night. Instead of the packed bar they were used to having, people waiting 5 deep to get drinks, there were bar stools empty. They were all going to the Stonewall. Julius is called the police department. They said, we'll raid the Stonewall. That way, they have to go back to the other bars. The movie hadn't started yet. They were getting ready to run it. The projector and reels of film were on the floor, and everybody was sat on the floor too. Now, if it had been any other bar, it wouldn't have been a problem. But because the Stonewall did it and pulled in all the clientele that would never normally have gone there, it was the perfect storm. A hot summer night. A bar that normally holds 20 to 30 people, now all of a sudden with 300, the cops stupidly deciding that's the bar we're gonna raid. And Judy dying the week before. Our attitude was, no, you're not gonna do that to us, not tonight. Now, a lot of the guys from the ramrod and boots and saddles were more aggressive, more masculine gaze than the Stonewall was used to having, and the cops were not used to confronting these types of gay men. They were used to hitting little old men and drag queens. The cops took the register money. The cops took the wishing well money. As they were leaving, they saw the projector and reels of film on the floor. One young officer went to grab them. The guy that owned them said, that's personal property. They got into a tug of war. The officer sat the money jar down on the bar in order to be confrontational. A black drag queen picked up the jar, whacked the cop on the head with it, and the shit hit the fan. That's when the gays started fighting back. The cops clubbed and kicked several people out to beat people with clubs that had no defense apart from their hands. But now the cops were having a hard time holding everybody back. It had always been easy before. You could tell the Stonewall clientele by what they looked like. But this time, the cops didn't know who the people fighting back were and who the passers-by were. And the surrounding crowd kept getting larger and larger. At one point, on Christopher Street, which was very dark, that's why it was so popular for cruising, 4 or 5 leather queens arrived on motorcycles, swinging bike chains they used to wear as belts, scaring the shit out of the police. They didn't know what the hell was coming next. But when the leather queens came up the street, oh, that's when the tide really turned. Oh my God, it was a mess. You could see people holding their bleeding heads. There was blood all over the sidewalk, blood all over the walls, bloody handprints from where people had put their hands on the walls trying to stumble away from the cops. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I said, what can I do? A guy said, how old are you? I said, 17. He said, get the fuck out of here. But I stood there till he said, look, if you want to help, go get some hot water, because the cops told the cab companies, we don't want any cabs picking people up and taking them to the hospital. So no cab would pull over if someone was bleeding or bloody. So they started sending me to the coffee shop on the corner to get cups of hot water. We were trying to get as many of them cleaned up as we could. After a while, that guy said, next time, leave the tea bags on the side. I mean, I was so young, I didn't realize. But you know what?